Hi everyone, welcome to our video about the topic 4, where we were talking about the debate about Islamic studies and the future of Islamic studies. And we are going to focus on the questions of the insider-outsider debate that we also touched in the seminar. Yeah.
So, first of all, the person that we decided to focus on from the reading was Ruth Maas, and just a point in the text that we read from her, which was quite confusing. Mm-hmm. But there was one interesting point that we liked, which was that she says that politics is allowed to masquerade as theory, and that this is a problem because it's become so important in theory. The idea of who can speak and how they can speak has become very important in subjects such as Islamic studies, and that this also affects who is represented in the studies and who gets ignored. So what we're going to talk about now is why this is problematic, why this is problematic in Islamic studies. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, there's a limit on who gets included within Islamic studies and who would count as a Muslim. So we came up with an example of someone who would be difficult to classify as either an insider or an outsider within this. And that's somebody who had grown up as a Muslim but then became an atheist later in their life. So we were wondering, would they count as an insider in Islam, or would they count as an outsider in Islam because they'd left the faith and chosen to be an atheist, or would they count as an outsider in atheism because they'd grown up within a faith and that was like their background, or would they count as an insider in atheism because they'd chosen to become an atheist?
Yeah. So it is actually, for us, it's not really clear. So you can't say inside, outside as a clear divide, kind of. It's more fluid and it's very difficult to decide.
And it shows why it's kind of problematic that there's this big debate about insiders commenting on things and outsiders commenting on things, when actually, like, it's quite hard to have a clear-cut division between the two. Yeah. But then we were wondering, would this person be able to comment more on atheism than somebody who's been an atheist for their entire life, or less? Or would they be able to comment more or less than someone who's been a Muslim for their entire life? And the problem in this situation is, if that person wanted to comment on something, would their ideas be like not count as kind of ignored because of who they are?
Yeah. And also, the question is, like, would someone who had grown up in a Christian family and then became an atheist be considered more of an insider than a Muslim who became an atheist? And this actually brings us to the next point we have. This thing that outsiders are often seen as neutral, as we also have discussed in class. So there's this perception that if you're an outsider, you're not as emotional, or you're not as attached, you don't have as strong opinions. But we also found that it is often connected with the West. So, like, if we talk about insiders, outsiders, we focus much on the outsiders, in this case being Western. And also Western academics are often seen as more objective. So when we think of outsiders and we only think of Westerners, this is a problem, because, for example, would you consider a non-Western and a non-Muslim also to be objective and an outsider in this case? Or if you take a counterexample in the context of Islam, would a Muslim be seen as more objective in Christian studies? And if not, it seems like, the consequence out of this would be that it's only Westerners who are seen as more neutral. So it's not about inside versus outside, but who is neutral, who is not. And in this case, the West being representative of neutral academia, which we also link to Enlightenment. Like, because we, as Westerners, went through Enlightenment, we now know neutrality, and we can be neutral and rational, and the rest can't, kind of.
Yeah, so it seems like just having this idea of an insider and an outsider, and the fact that like you can disqualify certain people from their opinions because they're not as rational as other people, or then like their opinions are based more in emotion and less in academia, is quite problematic. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had another point too, not now shifting away from the outsider, but going towards the point of the insider.
So for insiders, there's like a recent trend, and I think a lot in talk shows and debate shows of saying, or of debates, and a lot of this happens around Islam, of having someone who's seen as an insider and an authentic voice come in to comment on something. So like following on from Mass's argument that identity politics affects like who is allowed to speak and how they're allowed to speak. In some cases, it allows for somebody to have a view that might be controversial, but they're not seen as controversial because they're part of an insider group. So, for example, in the UK, in discussions of banning burqas, Muslim women have commented on it to say how backwards, how backwards it is wearing burqa, and how problematic this is, and that this represents views of women not having freedom, and speak for all women who would be wearing burqas, and make quite big generalizations. But because they come from the standpoint that I'm a Muslim woman and I'm allowed to say this, and I have the right to say this, where somebody else wouldn't be able to, and disqualify other voices for not being Muslim voices on that topic, and so use like their identity to completely legitimize their debate and their viewpoint, which is quite problematic. And we thought, and a good example of this is that if I spoke for all women and said that I don't agree with the Me Too movement because it actually hasn't happened to me and I haven't been sexually assaulted, so they can't have this movement speaking for women and saying that there's this big problem.
Yeah, but of course then you can't speak for all women. So you had your own experiences, and that's kind of the point. Everybody has their own experiences. So it's problematic if you speak for everyone, like you see yourself as a representative. But also, like as Maisie said, often this is used to authenticate views. So it's like if it comes from an insider, it's more authentic and it's like used as an argument. So that's also very problematic for academia. And like, if you use that, it's not good academia, I would say.
And like we said, there's kind of this black and white debate of how it's presented. Like, I'm a woman, I'm not a man, so I can speak for women and what they experience, which is not true necessarily. And that's why I think in having this idea of insiders and outsiders, you need to understand that there are grey areas, and there's not people who are definitively inside and outside. Insiders don't represent all insiders, and outsiders don't represent
all outsiders, and outsiders are not necessarily neutral. So to sum it up, we focused on the insider-outsider debate, and we're asking who decides who is where and what qualifies you as an insider or outsider. And concerning the outsiders, we noticed that there's often this connection to the West, like the outsiders are normally the Westerners, and also a connection in this connection to neutrality. So like outsiders are Westerners are neutral. Like that's something we have noticed. And the insider is authentic, so you could say used to authenticate statements, and also is shown, and sometimes also showed himself or herself as a representative as an insider for the whole insider group. So yeah, and we can conclude that we find that problematic if we talk about good academia. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for watching our video.
Yeah, thanks for watching.